mic'd up.
I got mine.
Well, that appears to be live.
All right, we'll get a lot of people viewing already, right?
Oh yeah, there it is. There's the video stream.
Okay,
Okay.
that's important because we got to see the questions as they roll in.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, welcome back to the channel. So tonight we're doing a kind of a rare YouTube live event. Tecmotion is pretty close to hitting 5,000 subs. Looks like maybe a couple of weeks we're going to be there. I never thought we'd be at this level this fast. Obviously, it's a long slog doing a car technical channel, especially in a busy world with a lot of a lot of stuff going on. And
I can relate.
it's not my job, right? Like I just don't work at it full time. So I really appreciate all the support you guys have given to me. I'm going to introduce you to Brent from Mongrels Garage. If you don't know Brent already, he's a friend and you know, guy who lives in the area here, does quite a bit of car stuff, and he has a really cool channel of his own. I encourage you to check out Mongrels Garage. And you know, we share an enthusiasm for 1980s cars and cars in general.
Absolutely, yes.
So what we're going to do here tonight is, if any of you guys have technical questions, feel free to throw them out. Brent knows quite a bit about Dodge and GM as well. Of course, I know quite a bit about Ford and a little about
you're
little
kind
about
of bleeding
GM.
red lately, haven't you? You kind of losing the blue blood a little bit.
Yeah, right. I do have a couple GM products. So, but in the absence of questions or whatever, I think we'll just have a little chat about 1980s cars in popular culture. Now, one of the things you may not know about Brent, even if you watch his channel, is that he has had quite a bit of involvement with the TV and movie industry. And Calgary, where we live, is an area that's had quite a bit of TV and movie activity over the years. I know we were talking off camera about some of the things that are filmed here. Winona, Billy the Kid,
Right.
Unforgiven was filmed here.
Shanghai Noon, Shanghai Nights, and there's a plethora of other stuff that has happened. There's some Disney productions came here, stuff like that. It's usually when they're looking for the Western scene or they're looking for the mountain scenes with the snow and stuff like that. That's pretty common for them to show up here and do some filming. There's a lot of Western sets around the area. So I've worked on a few of those over the years. I don't do that too much anymore. It's, you know, life moves on, right? But in my youth, in my teens and my 20s, I definitely spent some time on set, and I enjoyed it. It was it's not what most people think it is, but
well, Calgary has you know, a pretty impressive urban area as well. So there was, like we were talking about, a short-lived show called Viper that was filmed here. I think it might have lasted one season, but that was, a lot of that was shot in downtown Calgary.
Absolutely, and the surrounding area. I remember them being in Okotoks and stuff like that, filming some stuff there. And another show that was filmed here was Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series that was filmed in Calgary. So yeah, it does have its fair share of movie stuff going on, and they were looking at building a center for doing the movies and stuff. I think it might actually be under construction or done. So, and they're looking, like the studio, I guess is the appropriate name that you call it. But the interesting thing about that is there's actually a car element involved in these.
This is the tie-in. I mean, what does anybody on this channel care about the movies? Let's talk about car culture in the movies. So for starters, there are opportunities here for guys who have period correct cars to have those cars put in the movies. And I know I was parked by a guy at the Three Hills Cruise Night a couple weeks ago, I guess whatever, 1st of June, who was telling me about some friend of his who made, you know, thousands of dollars having his car participate in a movie. And then I guess actress who was supposed to drive the car didn't know how to drive a stick. So
you're kidding me.
He, so he got paid to, like, drive around with this lady for 3 or 4 days, teaching her how to drive a stick. And,
Nice, another person that knows how to drive manual.
Yeah,
Awesome.
right. So anyway, so there's opportunities for that. But one of the things that has struck me is the way that the view of history has been altered by the car guys. And what I mean to say here is that when movies or TV go looking for period correct cars, they don't always find the cars that were common in the era.
No,
they
sure
find the
don't.
cars that enthusiasts like us have protected, right?
Yeah,
So you end up with lots of Fox body Mustangs if you have an 80s movie, but not too many K cars or Dodge Caravans because that stuff's all been crushed, right?
Yeah, most of that stuff is not taken care of. It gets junked. I mean, there's the odd one kicking around, but you got to remember how many cars. Like, even if we go to stuff like some of the popular stuff, it hasn't really kind of survived much either. Like, you look at the Mark III Supras from the 80s and stuff like that. They were great cars. They had a great following. But you just don't see too many anymore. They're not around. They're not like the Mustangs and Camaros and Firebirds and Corvettes and stuff like that. I mean, the one thing that did survive throughout the eras is pickup trucks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fieros. I see those guys. I see those. I mean, if we weren't here tonight, we'd probably be at the.
Nothing about Fieros.
We'd be at the A&W, I'm sure. And I know I pulled in there last night, and Fiero guys pulled in ahead of me and took all the spots I was looking at.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's surprising how many
8 of
there's
them
still
or something
around,
like
right?
that. But I mean, lots of times when you're watching a movie that represents a particular period, but was filmed recently, you'll catch stuff like, here's an example. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Brad Pitt show. So there is a scene in that where the Sharon Tate character is looking across the street at the movie theater that is hosting her film, and she's going to go over there and watch her movie in the theater. And it just happens, for a split second, but a Mustang rolls by.
Yep.
And it's correct. I think that movie's set in about '69, and frankly, this is a movie that a lot of time and energy was spent on trying to make it look period correct, right? A lot. And so this is the one thing that I thought really stood out in it. This Mustang rolls by, it's about a 67 or it might be a 66. It'd be perfectly okay for the era, but like it's a couple-year-old Mustang at the time. That car was perfect. That was somebody's show car. The paint was perfect. They didn't come that way from the factory.
No.
If you show them in MCA competition and they look like that, you lose points because they didn't come that way from the factory. And then this car was supposed to be a couple of years old at the time the movie was shot. So it's created a little bit of a skewing of history where if you look back from movies that are filmed today about say the 80s, it looks like it's all Mustangs and stuff when it really wasn't, right?
No, it wasn't. Like we had stuff like the Lasers, the Daytonas, the Eagle Talons, and like you said, minivans and stuff like that. That was the stuff I remember, a lot of that stuff. Now, of course, you remember the Mustangs, the Firebirds, the Camaros, because those were the high school cars, right? Those are the ones that you were like, oh, that's the cool car. And let's face it, the Mustang in that era was king, the Fox body Mustang. And it's not because it was the fastest, best handling or anything like that. It was because it was the best bang for the buck.
Right.
And there's plentiful, like there was lots of them, right?
We got a viewer who says, and I'm not sure if it's about the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but he's talking about a VW Beetle that's driving up and down the street, and he's spending his time watching the movie, watching for the Beetle.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? I think
too.
a lot of us do this kind of stuff, right? Did you see the new Roadhouse?
I did, yes.
It angered me because the original one was full of Ford content, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The so-called bad guy, but Brad Wesley's his name, drives a Fox body. I always cheer for that guy because he drives a Fox body.
Whereas back to Swayze had the Riviera, right?
Yeah,
think
well,
it
he
was.
actually he
And
had a
then he
Mercedes.
as
That was
well.
his real car.
Yeah, that was his real car. But
Yeah.
the Riviera was the thing he.
Interloper comes
Yeah.
into town and tries to screw up the Ford guys and
Yeah,
all this.
yeah.
Anyway, the new one has no Ford content at all.
No, there's nothing.
None.
Actually, there's very few cars in it at all. It's boats mostly, as I recall.
Yeah,
but
bikes.
bikes and boats and stuff like that. And then I think they were driving in some type of Echo or something like that when he's taking the guys to the hospital. But it's not a car movie whatsoever. I don't think.
You remember when Netflix used to let you review movies?
Oh, vaguely, yes.
Yeah, I always reviewed them for Ford content.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
That sounds like something you would do for sure. Yeah. Well,
Even ones that seem totally irrelevant. Like I can't remember the name of the movie, Soul Surfer or something. It's about that girl who got her arm, I think, bit off by the shark.
Yeah, her arm or leg.
And then
or
later
something,
she was
yeah.
on The Amazing Race, right?
Sure.
Well, anyway, there was a movie about her, so I reviewed it for Ford content because after she got her arm bit off, she got rescued by someone with a Ford pickup and hauled to the hospital.
Oh yeah, okay, so I had good Ford
I'm like,
content.
thank God for Henry Ford,
Yeah.
or she'd be toast.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Don't know if. It's kind of surprising the Ford made it to the hospital. Honestly, no, just big. We're going to shoot that back and forth a little bit in this one. Well, I mean, and to your point, there is shows out there where, as a car enthusiast or an automotive enthusiast, you'll pick up on things. And I go even one step farther because my background's actually in aviation. So, as an example, I was watching the new Fallout series on the Amazon, right?
Sure.
And I very much enjoyed the series. It's one that I haven't enjoyed a lot lately, but that I genuinely enjoyed. But
if you played the game, it's very reminiscent of the game. It feels very familiar.
I actually went back and started playing the game again.
Yeah,
because of that, right?
I know. I got another one of my computer friends is that he went back and he'd never played Fallout 4. He's in like 120 hours already.
Oh yeah, no, I shut it down again. But it was good. But at the same time, I remember most of that technology. Like I realize it's kind of an alternate reality and stuff like that. But a lot of the technology it kind of stopped in the 50s when in that genre in that game, and so you had these kind of 50s styled cars and stuff, but when you're actually watching the show, they got a 60s Impala in the junkyard and stuff like that. It just doesn't fit to me. But most people aren't going to recognize that, right? And the other thing is they go into the scrap town and there's like a Boeing 737 cockpit and stuff like that, right? Flight deck. And it's just not something that had been developed in the 50s. That didn't come around until the 60s, 70s type thing. And for a car enthusiast, it just kind of really sticks on you, right? It's like it bothers you a little bit. You can get by it, but most people aren't even going to notice. And I think that's what you're going to end up with a lot of these movies is the average person doesn't pick up on it.
Fair enough. I would say that as car enthusiasts, we are having a subtle, almost imperceptible to the general public influence on the view of history. Because
sure.
if you sit there and watch movies about the 80s today, you see the kind of cars that we protected. Not the kind of, not necessarily the kind of cars that were common on the street. Like, I'll give you an example. My high school car was a Mercury Topaz, right?
Right.
And it was a good little car, but it was transportation A to B, and nobody protected those cars. Those cars are basically gone.
Well,
but they were really common. Like they were a really popular car.
And the other thing that was common was head gasket failure on that 2-liter, right?
Okay. Well, sure, but the thing is, there's cars that captured people's imagination that have problems that they just fixed.
Yes,
right. They
absolutely.
kept fixing them, and the Topaz or the Tempo was not one of them. So when those cars started to get long in the tooth, they're gone. And so now when you go to make a movie about the 80s, there's no Tempos to put in there.
No.
So the whole thing looks like it's Mustangs and like 80s pickups and square bodies or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
no Tempos and no
Chrysler minivans
K
with the
cars
wood
or
paneling on the
minivans.
side, the faux wood paneling, right?
It is funny though. Brent and I were at the Spring Thaw car show here. I don't know, must be getting to be
I know what you're going to talk
six
about.
weeks ago or something. And there's a girl here in town who has a K car, and I'm not very good with names. I kind of view her as, she's a very nice girl, but it seems like she's a little touched or whatever, because they spent $10,000 or $15,000 on this
I'll
car.
say, it's one of the nicest K cars in existence
Yeah,
today.
and I get it, because this is a family connection deal. It was like her grandma's
yeah.
car. People do all kinds of crazy things with car projects that aren't very advisable, but it's because of some kind of a sentimental connection like that, which is what she did. But that's a car where I think she could make some real money, because it's about the only K car around. And I'll tell you a story I know about that car. I used to live across the street from a really good glass man, like auto glass man. And somebody apparently threw a rock off an overpass through the windshield of that K car while she was driving it, and smashed the windshield. And
I remember that.
yeah,
I remember that.
yeah, it was a terrible deal, and not a very common thing in Calgary, but it happened. Of course, everyone who had glass inventories for K cars junked it, because there's no more K
There's
cars.
no more around, yeah.
And this guy's a neighbor that I know managed to come up with a windshield for it, and but it was like pulling teeth to come up with glass for
I
it.
can believe it. Yeah. And the funny thing is those were such simple cars, and now you're looking for something like that. It could cost quite the fortune to replace something like that in today's day and age, because it's just not available. So now you're looking at something custom, or you luck out and you get someone to find something, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, my Lincoln back here is a case in point. It's a car that there wasn't gazillions of them anyway, and fast forward to today, there's no, any of the parts that are really specific to the Lincoln are next to impossible. That means all the sheet metal, trim, interior parts, and the windshield is one of them.
Right, yeah.
You gotta stand on your head to come up with a windshield.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. But so the other thing I'd like to bring up is in the 80s, if you're not familiar with the cars of the 80s, I'd like to say there's really two categories of cars in the 80s. There were the cheap cars, and then there were the cheaper cars. Like they were all cheaply built, man. Like, they were junk. I think you can agree on that. A lot of them were junk. Like the cheap plastics and the thin sheet metal, like that, the old thick stuff, it was gone. They were trying to go lightweight, fuel efficient, stuff like that, and had the smog engines in them, and so that was the kind of the interesting thing about the 80s. When we rolled into the 80s, it was really kind of crappy.
Yeah, the front side of the 80s, I mean, let's look at whatever, they saved the Mustang, they redid it in 79,
Right.
and that's when we got the Fox 3 cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
But those first few years of
The
cars
first few years
were pretty weak, really.
Yeah. But then I also credit the 80s with the performance starting to come back. Like when we get into the later 80s, you get into, like I said earlier in the chat, the Fox body Mustang, when you got into the fuel injected 5 liters and they started putting some real power back in them, and they were the car to have in high school, right? And then they came out with like the 89 Turbo Trans Am. Well, that's one of the fastest cars of the day, and the
Grand
Nationals and stuff like that. So all those cars were protected, and they were starting to get some very high performance stuff starting to happen in these cars. They weren't quite at the technology level to take full advantage of what they were doing compared to what you can do nowadays, but they were getting there, and it was a lot of development. It was kind of cool to see some of that happen and get into these really one-of cars.
I mean, I've always had chip on my shoulder over the way Fox bodies have been treated, because in my view, the Fox body Mustang is the reason for the fuel injected performance world of today. Way more than the Trans Am or Camaro of
Yeah, I
the
don't think I'm
era.
going to argue with you too much on that. I mean,
But they don't get any respect. And even today at like, well, I had that beautiful Stalker here, right? I took it to
The fridge.
Yeah, the fridge.
Yeah, yeah.
Just it's gone. I just sold it here a week ago or something. But I took it to a few car shows and cruise-ins and stuff. It's hard to even get a look at it. Guys didn't want to look at it. Meanwhile, whatever. I have a some of you guys know I have a new Corvette.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel a little funny taking that to a cruise-in or whatever
Your
because
checkbook car?
yeah, right. All I did is write a check. Like I got all these cars here that have piles of me poured in them, right?
Yeah.
And you take them and whatever, you don't get any love. And then I take a checkbook car. Oh, people love love that or whatever. And with the Fox bodies, I feel like even today, especially around here, you take that to a general car show. And by the way, these are like 35-year-old cars.
Yeah.
It's not like they're made yesterday or whatever.
No.
And they don't get the kind of love.
I'm going to disagree slightly with you. They do get the love from the enthusiast. Like you get the Fox body enthusiast and the person that understands the car. They do. But let's face it, the Fox bodies were pretty boxy. Like they did not have, in my opinion, they were one of the more stylish cars at the time. But compared to what's around prior and after,
you know what? The Aries K and the Fox body had I hate to say it, had a very similar line to them.
Where and you get into like, at least I know the Trans Ams, you either, like the third gen F body cars, you either hate them or you love them type thing. But they had some style lines to them. They were, they had the wedged design to them. The Camaro had the 4 headlights on it, stuff like that. The Trans Am had the pop-up headlights, and they were hatchbacks. Just almost all the cars. I don't know why they all went hatchbacks, but that was the thing in the 80s.
Yeah, and I do think maybe you look at some of these GT Fox bodies with all the side skirts, ground effect stuff, and all that.
Just to style them up a
they
bit.
look like the 80s, but with an exception. In the 80s and early 90s, you went to a dealership and you looked at a 5-liter LX Sport, like a Fox Coupe. I always thought those cars just looked like a clean little hot rod, and they don't have no garbage on them. They're just a clean little car with 2 chrome pipes sticking out the back. And today, I still feel they're like that. I feel that is a little bit of a timeless car. A little like, maybe not quite, but a little like this pointing off camera here. I have a 33 Ford Street Rod here with a Coyote and stuff. That's a classic shape, right?
Which is featured on Mongrels Garage. Go check it out. You can find the video. Little plug. Well, I agree with you. And one of the things, like, I'm more like the Chevy, the Mopar guy, the Pontiac, stuff like that. But I do have a healthy respect for the Blue Oval and some of their stuff. And one thing I feel Ford always had right in those 80s Mustang was the exhaust. The sound of those cars was just, and to this day, it's still one of my favorite. Next to like the Pontiac, I love my Pontiac, right? But, and I'm not talking the Chevy Pontiacs, we're talking the Pontiac engines. So, but
where's Ernest?
Yeah, we'll get him in here with his Camaro. We'll get him back.
Right,
but
this friend of ours has one of every 1971 Pontiac made, with I think 1 or 2 exceptions. And
he's on the hunt.
But if you watch Tecmotion, his F body was featured in the F body versus Fox body challenge.
Yes, yeah. And so my goal is I want to have like a Firebird from every generation. So the only one I'm missing right now is the first gen. So I'm on a hunt for a first gen Firebird at some point. In the meantime, I filled up my yard with about 50 other cars from.
You might have to earn a little more money.
I might
get
have
a first gen
Firebird. You're starting to get out of that affordability range.
Those guys think they're made out of gold.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But I mean, those are not 80s cars. So we're getting a little off topic here. So I mean, you were really into this. You had a little bit of second gen F bodies in the 80s, and you had the third gens primarily in the 80s, and they went away in the 90s. And and like I said earlier, like I find it was interesting to watch those cars develop. And
I'm just going to give a shout out here to
yeah.
Pitsky. He's got an 89 5-liter with, looks like a nice car. TFS 190s, 11R heads, System Max 2. That's my second favorite intake.
I got to get up out of my seat and have a look here.
Anderson N41 cam,
Nice.
long tubes, and says he's going to be calling us for a dyno. Well, great. Make sure you call on the phone because I don't answer email. It's all, usually, because it's all spam.
Yeah. Make sure the car's in good shape. Really, it'll pass an inspection before you bring it to them.
Bring it with gas.
Yeah, and gas.
You know what? I have a video. Nobody watches it on like what to do to prepare for your dyno.
Yeah.
And it's all stuff that sounds like nonsense, like bring it with gas in. But I don't know, it was this week or last week I did one that didn't have no gas in it. You got to make a gas run.
Well, you got to make the quickest pass, man. But you can't have it full of fuel.
That stuff really happens.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's not the track, folks. The dyno's a little different.
Now, listen, I heard you talking about how all the 80s cars are junky or whatever, but...
No. I say they're cheap.
Okay, but
kind of junky.
I want to say when it comes to the Mustang, one of the reasons why the Mustang has survived for whatever the heck it is, 60-some years now, is because over all that time, generally, they've been a good car. Like, they haven't been a car that's just been nothing but problems and broke down all the time, and they've generally been a good car. And if I look at these Fox bodies, the big, and I mean, I see a lot of them. I had 2 Fox body customers here today. The biggest impediment to them still being a good car is human intervention, right? Like guys have been in there cutting up the wiring harness and doing hatchet job builds on them. And you know, there was a guy here pulled in this morning with a barn find 87 T-top GT, like a hatchback GT. Beautiful car. It has 34,000 K on it or something. That's K, so it's like whatever, 20,000 miles or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And red, gray interior, and I mean minty mint right down to the air silencer horn and all of that stuff.
Wow. And the rubber boot on the distributor still.
Yeah, right. And it runs great. And it had been sitting parked in a garage since last registered in 1991.
Okay.
And and this guy, it was last registered June 11th, 1991, I guess. So this guy just got the car, got it all cleaned up, and in order to try and maintain continuity, he went and registered it on June the 11th, whatever that is, like a couple days ago or something.
Yeah.
And so it's the same date or whatever. But that car is running great. Like there's nothing the matter with it. But that's a car no one's been intervened on. Right?
Okay, even the fuel tank and the little rubber hose between the pump and the...
Well, it drove up here.
We all know that's a common problem on those cars, right?
Sure, yeah. Well,
Firewall cracking. You know,
firewall cracking?
Yeah, from the clutch or the brake boosters. Like, those are thin firewalls on those cars. There's stuff, and the door frames would crack on them. But like, that's what I'm saying is you're right. They were very simple, very reliable. The powertrains were very reliable in these vehicles. But there's other ways they were built to keep them light and cheap and stuff like that. And I'm not going to toss stones just at the Fords here. Like, I mean, you look at the third bodies, the F bodies, they would crack behind the rear window and stuff like that, and doors were too dang heavy on those things, and they'd always wear out the bushings and
the doors always sag
and stuff like that, right? So they all had their issues, but it was the cheap plastics in the interior that killed a lot of the interiors in these things. Like you'd walk in, you know, the dash is doing the wave, and the glove, you know, the glove box.
Well, that's more a GM thing. The Fords aren't bad like that. Generally,
Ford had some of their issues in the interiors as well, but I'll agree with.
I mean, that's not really a Ford Mustang problem.
Yeah, not on the dash, no. But the door handles and stuff like that, I found often they'd be falling off on the Mustangs and stuff like that. It was
Oh yeah. Well, if you have a Fox body, that outer door handle, here's how you open it. You put your thumb on the dead center, and then lift up. If you grab her by the edge, it busts off.
Yeah, busts off.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's just stuff like that. It's like, but the powertrains in these cars were actually quite phenomenal, really. Like they were so that the 5-liter the 5-liter Ford engine is just dead reliable, honestly. And it's the same thing with the small block Chevys that were in the Firebirds and stuff. Like whether it was a 305, 350, those things were. It took a lot to destroy them.
Oh yeah. Like okay, I see these cars all the time, like 5-liter Fords. You take you bring them in. They got 250,000 kilometers on them. You pull the heads. There's no ridge. You can still see the crosshatch. You put them back together, and you put a blower on them. And plus, those cars more often than not, that 250,000 kilometers was hard.
Not easy.
Yeah, like they left the
not easy,
dealership with the tires smoking, right?
Yeah, the guy was. You spin the wheels down to the tire shop so you get the new tires after you drove it off the dealer's lot. Like the cars were driven hard, so there's a reason why they kind of fell apart, some of them. But for some reason the powertrains worked on them and just kept on working.
I got a comment here, says Dyno costs too much, can't afford gas too. Hey man, I'm sort of with you. Like the world has got so bad that don't you feel like you should be posting aspirational photos on Instagram of you holding like a can of Chef Boyardee or something?
Or something like that.
Or if you live in the city of Calgary, maybe a glass of water.
We're privileged today, aren't we?
For those of you who don't know, there's like a ongoing water crisis in the city of Calgary.
Yeah, the main line blew.
And it's been going on for more than a week now, I think.
Built in the 80s.
1975.
Close enough.
You know what? I actually think if you rewind back to the 70s, like a lot of that stuff from especially the late 70s was the stuff that was really slapped together. And then the American car companies started to get challenged by the Japanese. And so by the time you got to the late 80s, I think your quality level in these cars improved a lot.
It was getting up there a lot because the Japanese cars and stuff were truly better built, I'd say, in the early 80s. They really were the better product. Even in the drivetrain components, some of them were coming with forged internals and stuff like that in the Japanese stuff. That's just something you didn't get in the American stuff, no matter how high end you went.
Yeah.
Like the Corvette was still cast parts in it, right? It was just a simple 350 Chevy in there with cast components. I don't even know if it had a four bolt main anymore at that time. Like it was just very simple 350 Chevy.
Yeah.
Smogger engine basically. And so and then you hit kind of the mid 80s, and that's when they start saying, okay, we got to really step things back up again. And then they start coming out with some neat stuff like the SS Monte Carlo and stuff like, they put in some of the flash back into it and put a little more performance back into it. And we said like the GNX, the Regal Type T, stuff like that. And then you start getting some of the special edition, even the Mustangs and stuff. You start reintroducing stuff like the Bullet Mustang and
well, there was no bullets in the Fox 3 platform, but actually in the sort of early 80s there were like GT350s.
There was a spec car, I think, that
there's a McLaren ESC version. I got a friend in Saskatchewan who had, I think, 3 of those GT350s, and I know I'm going to be wrong here just off the top of my head, but they'd be like 84, something like that.
Yeah.
But he had 3 of them, and they weren't that common of a car, for sure. And then by '93, Ford had the SVT car, which. Yeah. You
go either way, but at least they put a turbo on it.
No, it wasn't turbo.
And we're not talking about the turbo Mustang here.
No, well, you're thinking about the SVO cars, and those ended in, I think, 86,
But at least Ford was smart enough to put a turbo on their 4 cylinders, whereas GM just put the 4-cylinder Iron Duke in the Camaro and called it a Camaro, and I was like, what are you thinking, man? That's what I'm talking about. Like, really, dude, you just put like a very crappy engine in this Camaro, and this is your performance car, man. It's not that base. Don't go that base.
So you have every generation of Firebird except first generation?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I have the second gen, which is my 78 Trans Am. I have the third gen, which is my 88 Trans Am. And then I have a fourth gen, which is my 99 Trans Am. So I'm just looking for I'll need a first gen one of these days.
I guess I'm going to need to get some space like you have if I'm going to keep collecting it. I mean, whatever, I had 10 cars here like 2 weeks ago, and I've sold one, and actually my little 11 here, which is a Roush Stage 2 supercharged car, looks totally stock, but it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
It's for sale because I just have to keep pulling stuff out of this shop every day in order to run dyno.
That's what I was going to tell you. Is the problem of having more room is you end up with more stuff.
Yeah, he just keeps filling it up, right? Like hard disk space.
I'm not kidding. I think at last count, there's 50 vehicles on my property. They're not all mine, but still there's, and that's not including trailers and boats and stuff. That's just.
How many did you say?
50.
You're like that guy from up north, whatever, the old peg leg there.
Oh, yeah. Peg. Yeah. Zip ties and bias plates.
Yeah, that guy, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Pitsky asks, what about the best way to approximate flywheel horsepower and torque based on rear wheel horsepower and torque? How much lower do the Mustang dynos read, and does the Mustang dyno correct for altitude? Okay, so
I'm going to leave that question to you.
yeah, okay. Honestly, if you go to 3 different dynos, you'll get 3 different numbers. The best thing to do is when you do have the car dynoed, whoever does it, ask them to give you a comparison to a flywheel number.
Sure.
And you know, another number that people bandy around is an engine stand number or like a gross number. So all these cars from the 60s were rated gross, right?
Yes.
So they look like they had huge power,
Yeah.
but
Most of the cars nowadays
those numbers are very exaggerated compared to like what a manufacturer would rate today, like an SAE net number, and then depends on the dyno how hard it is. I have personally seen numbers on my dyno that were where the customer had a sheet from a competitor, and that competitive number was 24% higher than what mine showed at the wheels. I don't know if you go back to my back catalog on this channel, there's a video of me with my silver coupe, my 90 coupe, running a silver S197 at an invitational shootout in Medicine Hat.
Yep.
And that S197 was dynoed by Justin Burcham. That was at the time, one of the most widely quoted dynos in the Mustang world. Justin was the NMRA champion, and the Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords guys dynoed there all the time. And the guy, Justin, signed this guy's NHRA license, all this stuff. The car was stripped down pretty hard, stripped more than my coupe, which is like a full interior car, headliner even, stuff like that, right? And it was supposed to have had, and it's a turbo car, which have a big top end charge, right? It was supposed to have had 172 horsepower advantage at the wheels on the day of this race. It was supposed to have 172 at the wheels advantage,
So
and
he should have outran you in the quarter mile.
well, and the car, I think that car, it would weigh a little more than my Fox, but if it was 200 pounds more, that's about all it was, because it was stripped a lot more. Mine's like a 2-seat car and all this stuff, right? Anyway, we lined it up. I gave him a fair race. I didn't even try to burn down on him or anything, even though he gave me the opportunity for it. And you can watch it. It's on my channel if you go back there. At the stripe, he was 0.1 miles an hour faster than me, right?
Yeah.
Where'd all that power advantage go? Well, it wasn't there, and it's because the numbers between the dynos are different.
Yeah.
Now, the other question here is, what about weather correction? So my setup has a built-in weather station, and actually each individual sample is instantaneously corrected against the instantaneous weather reading. And in Calgary, you know, the weather can change really fast. Like the atmospheric pressure can change really fast. So
Yeah.
over the course of a dyno day, you can actually have quite a wide variation. But
Sure.
as a general rule, we're able to back cars up on different days that are within a horsepower, even though it's different day, different strap down, as long as the car is the same. So, and that's because it's instantaneously weather corrected. And I mean, I think we have a pretty good comparison to what a manufacturer would rate a car, or even to an engine stand. The more calculations you do, the wider your error bars
Sure,
get.
absolutely. And I'm going to weigh in a little bit here, but if your point of going to the dyno is to get the highest horsepower number, you're kind of missing the point of the dyno. What you really want is you want the consistency in increasing and tune with your tuning, right? So you want to be on the same dyno so that you have the same base and you're going up and
Right, and you want that dyno to be consistent. Like if you didn't make any,
right?
if you didn't make any changes, you want it to read the same.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And whenever, like, okay, whenever
you're
we
competing
have
against yourself when you're dynoing the car. You know?
whenever we've made changes here, like I moved shop at one point, so the whole dyno was picked up and moved to this newer shop. I've done countless computer system upgrades on the dyno. And what I've always done is taken a before with a car, a test car, and then taken an after to make sure that everything is right. It's still the same.
Sure.
And now, I don't know, the only guys who ever like this dyno for numbers are the road race guys, where some of these road race series, if you guys don't know, sometimes you can get your car classed with a scale ticket and a dyno sheet. And because this dyno is so notoriously stingy or whatever, you can end up with a ringer car that way. But I mean, nobody likes the number.
Well,
and if you don't take the car and do something with it, like a drag race or something like that, where you get a real world result, you could feel like it's not enough power. But
sure, like I said though, my point of view on the dyno is if you're going to the dyno to have bragging rights, you're going to the dyno for the wrong reason.
yeah.
The dyno is to optimize your vehicle. So it really doesn't matter as long as the dyno is consistent and you use that same dyno. What you're trying to do is you're competing against yourself and your car, and to bring that up to its peak horsepower on that particular dyno. Then you know the car is tuned to its optimal setting, right?
When guys call me and it's pretty clear they just want a number, and it's a keyboard cowboy type of deal or whatever,
Sure.
I usually suggest that they try somewhere else who has a dyno that reads higher.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if that's what you want, this isn't the place. It's not the place.
No.
But if you want the car tuned right, and you want to work with me over time to build a car that works better, I actually think that this setup that I have runs very, very close to the street or the track. And I'll tell you, I mean, I raced all over Western Canada with that silver coupe. I won races all over Western Canada with it, and there's massive elevation and atmospheric differences between like Calgary, where we're 3,500 feet, and say Mission, BC, where you're
Down at sea level.
0
almost.
feet. There's days where the DA at Mission is minus, right? I never made trackside tuning adjustments to the car because it was right when I got there. The stuff that you might change, or that I changed at the track, would be things like, your launch setup, suspension setup.
Sure.
It's a slipper clutch in the car, so sometimes you make some adjustments to the clutch, how tight it is, or how fast it comes on, those kind of changes. but those are changes that you have to do at the track. But I never made tuning adjustments because the car showed up right because it was right on the dyno.
Yeah.
Where I see lots of guys, they take the car out and they run on the dyno. And then they take it out and they retune it on the street, or they're messing around with their laptop at the track. And I mean, get it right on the dyno, and then you're not second guessing
Right,
yourself.
and the key here is the consistency, right? Is like it really doesn't matter what tool you use as long as it's consistent. And the dyno is a great tool for optimizing the engine performance and stuff like that. But you could, if you have a good like dash G-force type setup where it measures all your servers 60 times and you start tuning off of that, you could accomplish good results with that. You might not get them dialed in perfect, but as long as it's consistent, you'll get good results out of using a tool like that even. And then you could come to someone like you at the dyno and really dial it in and fine tune it.
Those
right?
street tools help, but you want to know how I end up with a chassis dyno? Because whatever. I mean, I worked with a PhD mechanical engineer on that Fox body project. I'm a degree computer scientist, and we had like all tunable engine management system. You want to know something? I had the very first tweaker that was sold online, and tweaker RT, and straight out of Katy, Texas, and we spent a year with the car on the street and on the track, data logging it, what we could on the street and track, and we had a G-Tech Pro Comp, which was, the back in the day equivalent of, what's the one all the guys use now? There's a really good one that's out now. Anyway, we can never get the car to work the way it should have. So I looked around the guys at dynos around here, and I decided, I didn't really want any of these guys to touch my car. So I bought my own dyno, and we bought it for that car. And then ultimately I decided might as well open for business to the public or whatever. But I think we gained 0.8 of a second on a car that had already run in the like mid 12s, like 1270 or something. I think we went from 1270 to 1194 with no parts, 0 parts, just setup.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And what year was this?
that was after a year. It'd be like 04. This is after a year of messing with the car on the street and the track, and we were at the track every weekend.
Sure. Yeah.
Like every weekend. I mean, we still had a track here. We'd be there at Secret Street every Friday night.
Secret Street. I remember Secret Street.
Yeah.
Oh, instead of being here doing what we're doing now,
Yeah,
you and I would have been out at Secret Street. drag
Totally,
racing.
yeah. I'd be at a tech line about now.
Yeah, we'd be in the tech line. You get me up there, Red. I want to go. Woo! I paid my $20. I want to race.
That's right.
Yeah, I miss those days. Those were good days because you actually had access to a proper drag track, a quarter-mile drag track, and they had the ambulance still there and stuff. You paid $20 and you could go race your buddies or whatnot. You had a rival in town and you wanted to see, okay, let's figure it out, man. You get out on a prep track and actually hash it out, and it was a great time. I really miss that. And actually, we were talking about this earlier. It's not that far away where the track used to be from this shop. It was just a little bit south of here.
Yeah, 6 miles from here or something like that. Really, I don't know. Racetracks, drag strips in particular, are under pressure all over the U.S. and Canada.
It's unfortunate.
I don't really understand it. It's a good, clean family kind of an activity, and it keeps guys off the street.
Absolutely.
But for whatever reason, drag strips are under pressure everywhere, and we lost ours. I mean, I don't know, Calgary metro area is like 1.5 million people or something.
Yeah, we lost it like 15 years ago, I think it is now, isn't it? Something like that?
Yeah, well, 12 or something like that.
It was quite a while ago now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we really haven't had anything to replace it anywhere nearby.
Well, and it's bad for the economy too. Like, I mean, I promise you, a genuine component of my business was setting up guys' drag cars, right?
Yeah,
And once we lost the track, almost all of the drag guys disappeared.
Sure.
I mean, whatever. I get guys, I don't know, they think I'm a famous enough Mustang guy or whatever to come here from all over. I just did a car out of Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, which is,
Yeah.
well, it's a long way
That's a
from
bit of a
here.
drive,
And this week, and those guys know who gets the car to work. But there used to be piles of guys who this is what they were doing every Friday night. They'd be at the street legals, and
Well-
and then next paycheck they're putting some more parts on their car to try and get it quicker, and they'd be back.
Honestly, the dynos were in their infancy at that time. So if you wanted to test your car, that's where you did it. You did it at the track.
Yep.
And that's where you got it dialed as best you could, and then the dynos start showing up. And if you had the connections, you had the money or whatnot, that's where you would head, is you'd head to these dynos and get your car to it. But as you said, not all dynos are created equal, and not all operators are created equal. Now, I will say we have gotten off topic a little bit, and it's turned into more of a plug for Tecmotion.
Yeah, it's not really supposed to be a plug for the shop. But
That's okay. It's your channel. Plug it all you want. Right? But if it wasn't for you, I might not even have a YouTube channel, to be honest. Like, how I got into this is it was during the bug, and my goal, I was bored. I wanted to get a Gen 3 Hemi running independent on the factory components for inexpensive, because you always watch these shows and these guys were throwing tens of thousands of dollars to get a Gen 3 Hemi running. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Can't be that hard, man. You got to be able to get these things running for cheaper than that. Like, it's not much different than the LS. Come on.
it's still an engine for crying.
It's still an engine, right? So that was my goal, was to set out and do it. And you know me, I didn't have a lot of money. I was going through the divorce and all that stuff. So I went to the dump, and I hauled out an old workout bench.
Well,
out
from
of
the dump? I thought you weren't allowed to pick stuff out of the dump.
from my dump yard. Yeah, not from the city dump. I live out in the country, man. So I haul out a workout bench out of the dump. Yeah, I'm a dumpster diver. I admit it. All right.
This sounds like Honey Boo Boo or something.
So I cut this thing up. I modify it. And the goal was to be able to just make an engine run stand out of it, and put a variety of engines on this. And I did it. I mounted the Hemi on there. I got the thing turning over and everything else. And then I sent the computer away to get programmed. And meanwhile, I worked on the wiring and the fuel and all that stuff. I got it set up. And when the computer came back, I went to start it, still wouldn't start. And I'm talking to the guy on the phone. And he's like, "Oh, the security's disabled. Should start. I'm like, "No, man, there's something not right." And that's when I started talking to you. And I said, "Matthew, I think there's something on the CAN bus here that's preventing it from starting." And you're like, "Well, I'm not really a Dodge guy, but I'll take a look at it." "Oh, sure," right? And you found it, right? I mean, it was that start over CAN bus, that command. I said, "Okay, let's try to turn that off." You turn it off, boom, that thing fired right up. It was beautiful music, right? And
Sometimes it works out.
yeah, it does, right? It does. But I mean, that was an educated guess on both our parts. We kind of went through the system of troubleshooting. Why isn't it's got fuel? It's got this. Why is it not allowing it to spark up and run? And that was a Gen 3 Eagle engine, so it was a little more complicated than just the previous generation. But I want to document all that, and that's why I started my YouTube channel, is to document that particular project, and it just kind of kept going from there. So I have to thank you for all the extra work you've created for me.
Well, no, whatever. We're friends. I tried to give Brent's channel a little boost. I agreed to have my street rod here featured on his channel. I mean, it's a very special car. Got 2,500 hours of work in the car. It's a car that I think the first year after I finished the car, I ran a full season of time attack at the road course at Castrol, and I won 21 car show trophies with it. I think
it was a lot.
and that was a car that I was racing, and then And then McGuire's had it in their World of Wheels booth 2
Yeah.
years in a row. So, and whatever. And I mean, I got a lot of work in these cars. They're not sponsored by anybody but me, yours truly. And I'm not very keen on letting somebody else ride on my coattails, but I agreed to have it featured on your channel, and I think that worked out. That worked out great.
It did, and I still appreciate that a lot.
It was a happy video on your channel. I was glad to do it.
But that was the start of it. Is like when I asked you for help with the programming on the Hemis, and then from there we kind of developed the relationship and got into. And then I remember talking to you about your channel. I think it was Claire's home at the time. You're like, I just don't really do much with it anymore. I said, dude,
I'm going to take just a second out here to answer
absolutely.
a technical question. Pitsky asks, for an A9 Fox body, can a tune bypass the factory rev limiter? The answer is yes. However, what happens with the TFI ignition setup is when you get past about 7,000 RPM, it loses track of the pip signal and it'll shut down. Yeah. So you can run a 6,500 or 6,800 RPM car, or even a 7,000 RPM car that way. But if you got to get higher than that, then you're going to need something else, probably with a crank trigger. Now, I see another commenter saying, "Yeah, I hope you got a built engine to handle this." Absolutely. You cannot take a stalker and run it that high. I got, my drag car is a 9,000 RPM engine. It's too much for the factory system. I have SDS in there and a crank trigger, but I have worked with guys that have, you build a Super Victor Stroker Windsor setup for road race, and you build it to run 65, 68, no problem. It'll run with the factory engine management, no problem. But what'll happen is you keep adding to it. You get to, I did one for a guy. He had a car that was definitely capable of more, but we just kept trying it until we got about 71, 7,200 and it shut off. So.
Yeah. Well, and then this brings in an interesting segue back to the 80s as well, is the computing power. Like we said, is you start getting into the fuel injections in the Mustangs and stuff like that, but they were better because, I mean, we go back to the early 80s and we look at the Cadillac with the 468, and it just didn't have the computing power to keep up with managing the cylinders when they shut down. So the Mustangs, they were getting a lot better at that point, but you're still dealing with archaic computer technology that it just doesn't have the resolution to keep up to some of that stuff with the factory stuff, right?
The issue isn't
when you start spinning it that fast.
This issue isn't actually even in the PCM.
Yeah.
This issue is an issue of the ignition signal, which is a square wave, right?
Right. Yeah.
And the faster things are going, the closer that gets together.
Right.
And at a certain point, you just lose resolution.
Yeah.
So the solution to that is using a system that has more resolution in the wave generator,
right.
which is like a crank trigger, right?
And that's why with the modern engines, you get into these different reluctor wheels and stuff like that, where they keep increasing the number of teeth in them, because you start out with like a 16-tooth reluctor wheel, and then you got a 32-tooth, and now you got a 58-tooth, and that's why is they're trying to hone in that resolution for stuff like that.
Ken H says, I'm going to bore you guys. I own a 93 GT, original owner, 33K. Well, that's awesome, man. 33,000 miles.
That's not boring. That's cool.
That's like that's like this car that showed up here today. 87 T-top car,
Yeah.
and
Those are rare.
Yeah, for sure it is. I took some pictures of it. Maybe throw them up on my Instagram if you guys follow my Instagram. It's just at Tecmotion Dyno on Instagram, and I'll throw up a few pictures of that car. I mean, beautiful, beautiful car. And the interior was super nice as well.
Do you remember those caddies with the 4, 6, and 8 cylinders?
No, I never. Are you kidding me?
I know that's not your cup of tea.
Had a
but
Temple, man.
They never
well,
worked
Topaz.
well. Yeah. Oh yeah, I sacrificed a temple or two to the gods. Those head gaskets didn't handle my right foot very good.
I never lost a head gasket in mine. Maybe it's the way you were driving it.
Oh, I guarantee you, it's the way I was driving it. I was driving it like it should have been a Mustang, but it wasn't Mustang.
I had an 85, and it was like last of the carburetor cars.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. The other thing that the Escorts. Remember the square body Escorts back then? Too,
Oh
right?
yeah.
They were. They were junky little cars.
My cousin, I think he shared it with his sister, had one of the EXP Escorts.
Oh, I remember those. Yeah.
I always thought it was kind of a cool little car. But I mean, there's a car you would have seen occasionally on the street in the 80s. They are gone.
Yeah,
I mean,
gone.
gone.
You haven't seen any.
I can't even remember the last time I saw one of those.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're doing a
Charger?
Hollywood movie and you go, well, "Where's all the Escort EXPs?"
Yeah.
Forget it. You're not getting any.
Well, how about the Dodge Charger, the '80s Dodge Charger? Do you remember those?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, they were like a front.
There was even like a
drive.
Shelby version, wasn't there?
Yeah. They were a front wheel drive. I think it was a 4-door. It was just a piece of junk, right? And yeah, like I said, the '80s cars, they had their really bad stuff, and then they had their really worst stuff. And in the early '80s, it was the really worst stuff. In the later '80s, it was kind of the bad stuff, but it was coming around. It was getting a lot better, and I'm just trying to think. Like, I can't even think of some of the other vehicles anymore that would have been around back
Well, how about the
then.
Chevette?
The Cavalier.
How about the Chevette?
Oh, the Chevette. Oh,
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about my high school parking lot? Yeah, it was full of stuff like Chevettes.
Okay.
Or those early. There was a guy there who had one of those early Honda Civics.
Berettas.
You know the
Honda Civics.
but
right.
the early
Yeah,
ones,
CX,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
CRX.
Yeah.
Honda Civics. And
That guy was funny. He worked at his gas station, and they had some problem with like the rival gas station across the street. And one night, whatever, the rival guys came over and stole their pop machine and then smashed it up and threw it out in a field or whatever.
So they just pulled a full office space to take the bats to
Yeah,
it.
it was totally like that. Yeah. They figure that's got to put them out of business. No more Coke machine or
Okay,
whatever.
well, I'm starting to recall someone like the Cavalier and the Beretta.
Yeah,
And the
Z24.
Z24.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the Turbo Sunbird.
Yeah.
The Sunbird obviously was another one before the Sunfire.
Yeah.
Right. That was. So like I said, I'm kind of remembering the Chevy stuff. That was kind of where I was in that era. I was kind of with the Chevy. I had my '78 Trans Am and I had my 9. At that point, that was one of my first cars. Was my '78 Trans Am, but I did have like a Ford Custom 500, a '71 Ford Custom, which is basically a LTD. That thing was a land yacht, man. That thing was massive, and it had 2 doors on it. But at 351 Windsor, it was a lot of fun, that car.
Well, okay, let's talk about. So my dad's got a '79 Continental Collector Series, right?
Yeah.
Only one of those Mark V's with no opera window.
Yeah.
With a 400 in it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Which
sure.
it's based on the Cleveland lineup, but those motors were so choked off.
Oh yeah.
And
Big garbage.
we changed that car to. Edelbrock only make one manifold for it. It's whatever their lowest line is, Torquer, or not even Performer. I don't know what it is, but whatever their lowest line, that's the only one they make for it. Put that on a Street Avenger 670, and the car, and we dynoed the car, and it gained a third.
Oh really?
A third
Of its
from
power.
a manifold and a carburetor.
Oh, wow.
Right? It was unbelievable.
Can you imagine if you uncorked the exhaust?
Well, it has. It's a true dual, but
Yeah,
it's Flowmaster 40s.
Okay,
so.
nice.
But the car is 19 feet 2 inches long, so
yeah.
there's somebody else's problem.
Yeah, that's like my Parisienne. I think I measured my Parisienne out. My
Anyway,
67.
that car's 400 cubic inches, right?
Yeah.
And it's makes nothing for power.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it's my 67 Parisienne. I think it's about 19 feet long as well. 2-door, fastback type design, but that's a big car, dude.
yeah. Well, listen, Brent, we're an hour into this. I think we
Okay.
only sort of guarantee an hour. Hopefully we got everybody's questions answered. I always half expect that I'm going to get more technical questions because guys phone and email and message me all the time. It's meant to be an opportunity for you to ask questions. But I answered a few little questions here, and I hope you've enjoyed the live and enjoyed hanging out with Brent. And stay tuned. I know I'm a little slow producing content for this channel in the summer because I'm so busy with the shop. And then if I'm not doing stuff with the shop, summer is the time to enjoy these cars.
Oh,
so I'm out
absolutely.
enjoying the cars. And but I'll try to keep pushing out some content. We got some projects lined up, and Brent and I were even discussing a little video that I think, well, maybe we want to
Let's
talk
do that
about
one,
it here,
yeah.
but I think we got a good idea for a video that I think will.
We can give a hint. Can we give a hint? It involves Ford and LSs.
Yeah.
We'll give it that.
But not what you think.
Not what you think, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. It might be what you think, but I doubt it.
Yeah, probably not. Anyway, hopefully we'll find some time to try that out, and I think we're not going to do that live. We'll do it as a
video,
recorded thing. So we'll see how it works out. Anyway, thanks again for stopping in, and we'll see you guys next time. I think I got to go up and shut the chat off up there.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thanks for having me.